Oops.
Well, I call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Ms. Mucko?
Here.
Mrs. Darrow?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Erkins?
Here.
Mr. Rastigar?
Here.
I think
Sophie's on the call. Can we get a hear from you? Sophie, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Give us just a second. If you're speaking, we're not able to hear you come through, so that I know that the team here is working on that.
She did verify she can hear us. We'll work on making her heard.
Thank you. Do we have a verbal in there on just a, yep, okay. Person.
Sophie, can you try again?
Yes. Can you hear me? Awesome.
Awesome. You're good. Thank you, Sophie.
All right. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
No massive changes. I'm just going to be providing the monthly activity and financial report as Stephanie Burnside is out sick today, so I will be providing the full report.
All right. On to approval of the minutes from January 22nd, 2026.
So I can make a motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? On to the monthly activity and benefit report.
Thank you, members of the board, Madam Chair. Appreciate your time today. I'm excited to kind of give the operating results through January of 2025 or January of 2026. That's correct. January of 2026. Just a couple things to highlight here. We did have a annual staff party. We did that over at the Riverside Hotel. This is kind of a holiday party, but our team is so busy during the holidays, we like to wait until after the holiday season is over. This is our annual staff party, and it was a talent show that we did. So we did Boise Center's Got Talent, had several members sign up from our team to do different musical or theatrical type of auditions or performances. And it was a really great time just to get to know all of our staff members, spend a little bit of time with their family members. Riverside did a great job of hosting us. So again, just want to call out a big thank you to the Logistics team and the entire staff that helped put that together, because it is a big.
Who's most talented?
What's that?
Most talented.
All of them were most talented. So we did actually do I know. There was 5 or 6, and I can truly say there was a great deal of talent that was showcased. My favorite was probably the full band that played. In all honesty, they did a full band set between 3 of them and did a cover of a song, but all of it was outstanding. It took a lot of courage for the team to get up in front of their peers and family members to do that. INL Horticulture Expo, one of our 2 largest events last month. Again, really great feedback on the carpet colors, the look of the lobby. Also, that botanical carpet pattern really was something that the INL group really appreciated. It just fit the event really well with their own signage and their theme this year. So I just took a picture of that to showcase how that botanical look on their own signage kind of showcased. Really, really proud of what we've done on the carpet in the refresh in Boise Center West. On the monthly events report, I've got this continuing just to show you kind of the prior month and then the prior year's months as well. So this would be for January of 2026. Again, total events that we had would have been 24 events, slightly above where we were at in fiscal year of 2024. 25, we had 21. But again, you start looking at the purple line there. That's the number of conventions, and banquets are the 2 that really drive a lot of the revenues. And then those small meetings kind of filling in the utilization between those times. But had a great month overall and continue to see that lead to really great attendance. January's attendance, again, 10,775 total unique attendees walking through the building. Again, slightly over the prior year, over forecast. And then if you look at it, 24, one thing I want to point out here is 24, and we'll get into this as I get into the revenues of 24, economic impact of 24. 24's revenues were higher than that of 25, a little bit lower on the attendance. But when you start taking a look at the economic impact that I'll get into, I just want to highlight to the board there as we're continuing to really evaluate economic impact and revenue generation for events going forward. Overall guest satisfaction, we continue to do extremely well through 21 events that we've had results back for from the survey. 20 of those having 5 out of 5 or 5 stars, 4 stars on 1. So continue to see really great review scores come on our overall guest experience score. That's up 7 from the prior month. We had a lot of events in December, if you remember. That's our first month of the fiscal year. So again, 7 up from the prior. So with 2 months to go, or 2 months through, we've had 21 total responses to those. As far as market strategy and on the sales side, the sales team continues to do really great work, continues to see really great pacing. Future booked revenue is at about 29% of the goal for the fiscal year to date at 1.4. Future booked economic impacts in about 7.7 of 41%. And then future booked room nights at 14,000 at 43% of the goal. So again, really great start to the year. Porsche Club of America confirmed for July of 2027. That's an estimated of 5,000 total room nights of a $2.5 million economic impact. Then also the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians contract issued for July of 27 as well. And that one would be an estimated of 615 room nights and 378,000 in economic impact. So July of 27 is looking very strong.
Porsche Club like 10 years ago or?
Correct, we did, and it was a little more than 10 years ago, I would say, probably closer to 15, somewhere in that
2020, like 02.
20 years ago. So it was when I first started.
I guess I was.
Again, this just shows you kind of in the pacing and how it looks from a metric of the prior year. Really, I start to look at that teal box and how we're pacing from the year prior, and then also from the goal and what we're looking at from the year. And all of these are really good indicators. Future booked revenue a little bit slightly down from the prior year, but the economic impact up. And that's one thing I'll continue to point out as I go through this report. But future booked room nights, again, looking up on that one from prior year and doing really good on the goals for the year on the team. Couple things on operational updates. We've had LED posters that have been deployed throughout the building. This is something that we used some capital money to purchase, and the AV team has done a great job of really finding utilization. These type of screens can actually be joined together to form a larger screen or separated apart to create kind of that banner effect. They just showcase extremely well and is another area for events to kind of get some additional exposure throughout the building for either sponsor signage, event signage, but also wayfinding as we need to connect people and get them from one side of the building to the other or from one room to another. We are on the punch list of items that remain from the Boise Center refresh project. A couple things just on seamage, where the seams are coming together on the carpet that we've got some concerns of where they're matching up or not matching up. And then a couple of things that still need to be come back as far as wallpaper, where we did some paint or wallpaper didn't come in but make it look finished. We've done some temporary paint. You can't really tell. I would challenge anybody from the board or attendees to find those. The team has done a great job of getting those items completed with just leftover pieces to remain. And again, digital signage on the far right there is another great project that was completed. Wayfinding maps, larger event room signage outside of all the breakout rooms, a little bit more opportunity for just easy to read, but also for exposure for the events to potentially use for additional images, sponsorships, and recognition in that way. So I think, again, really great job by the team there. On the front and center in-house food and beverage side, Governor's Dinner, 941 attendees. That was the very first event we hosted after the carpet was ready to go. I'm very excited about that. That's a picture that you're looking at there of that event. IAC, the Idaho Association of Counties, Midwinter Conference, 70,000 in food and beverage, a function over 4 days. And then Jaden DeLuca, about 22,000 in total bar sales. The really exciting news I get to announce today is we have officially hired a new director of food and beverage to replace Chris Lochner. That'll be Gary Minter. He comes with a great deal of experience from Compass Group, Planet Hollywood, Troon Golf. Actually has started out in the culinary world and developed into a director of food and beverage. A lot of hospitality experience from high-end establishments and can really bring another level of our food and beverage experience to the Boise Center team. He's going to start on March 7th. That's actually the very first day that he will be here, and that is our largest event, one of our largest events of the month, in particular with the Idaho Democratic Party. So he'll get thrown into the wolves right away, and we will make sure that he's got a chance to work alongside Chris Lochner, who's not in the room today, but he'll be about 30 days for Chris's, a little less than 30 days for Chris's departure on April 1st. So again, as I started pointing out, kind of operating revenues, and I'll just drop over the top here so you can kind of look at 24 to 25 and then 25 to 26. For January, just to kind of point out as we continue to try to revenue generate the space, but also economic impact is something that I'm extremely proud of the team for what they're doing here. Going back to 24, the revenues were up a little bit higher than what we saw in 25. Again, outpacing that now in 26, coming in at 769,000. So the team's doing really, really well for the year. And the revenues for Boise Center on the gross margin side, we continue to do really well as well, with that start in December being a big jump start. We're sitting at 25.6% with a goal this year of 22%. Now, when I talked about economic impact, if you take a look at 24's economic impact, while the revenues were higher than what they were in 25, 25 actually came in higher for economic impact, and 26 came in higher for both revenues and economic impact. So again, when we tend to look at these revenue generations, economic impact is a big goal of the district. And so being able to book events that drive both of that activity is something that I'm paying close attention to and really trying to incentivize the team to take a consideration into. I think that sends a great message as to the revenue generation and the economic impact story that the district is doing. We had 3.4 million prior month in economic impact. We're about 22% of our annual goal. In fiscal year to date, we're sitting at about 12.2 million. Obviously, December was a giant jump there with the ability of having Festival of Trees finish off there. Continuing to look at lodging room revenues, this is a similar story as I've been repeating over the past couple months, is where we're starting to see some indicators that there is a bit of a softening on lodging room revenues, as you'll see from the prior year, slightly down, but down at the bottom on that year to date, as you're pacing, you can kind of see that those negative numbers in 26 is the first time that we're seeing those within the last 2 to 3 years, if not longer. Just an important note for the district to kind of pay attention to. With those revenues, we're seeing the same thing happen on the demand side as well. As you start to looking at the lodging room demand coming down slightly in 26 by about 1.5% from year to date, and then a running 12 months just slightly down under about 2 points. So as you take a look at these in here, and I'll just drop this over the top here, you'll start to see a similar story. Obviously, occupancies in 24 at 52.2, climbing up to 55 in 25, and then slight drop about 0.4% in 26. ADRs, again, same story, 24 at 123, a big jump and climb there in 25, and then a slight correction of about 30 cents in 26. Just move forward here. Oh, there we go. Continuing to look at this just from a trajectory, this is a standard slide that gets just statically. It's right on pace with what we forecasted, so no adjustments necessary, but we are seeing that flattening happen and a slight downturn on that occupancy on that bottom lower level there. So something to pay close attention to as we look ahead. Couple district updates, just high level. We've updated the district strategic plan that was approved last month. That has been uploaded to the district website. It is under we have also updated the future of the district section of the website to reflect the current status of where we're at as we go through that process. So we would point to anybody that's interested in what the district is looking at doing or doing currently. Mary Michael and the team have done a great job of getting the website updated and keeping all of the updated reports or documents that go along with each of those items. So we do have the new strategic plan uploaded on the website that you can review and take a look at. Boise Center leadership staff has a half-day session scheduled here on March 3rd, coming up next week. With Black River PM, who conducted the strategic plan update for the district. This is to align our operational objectives with the district strategic priorities. I think this is going to be a great exercise for the team to go through, and we're going to see great results in how we as operational leaders can really support the strategic priorities of the district and make sure that those are aligned. And I'd just say to the board today, we thank you guys for your trust in the team and not getting involved in the day-to-day operations and allowing those that I know have the experience and the expertise to operate their departments, the autonomy and the ability to run their departments effectively. And so we look forward to updating those, and I will be sure to come back and let the board know what those operational objectives are as they get developed. We do have a second scope of work that I've mentioned over the past few months with Johnson Consulting getting ready to be completed. The expected on that report, and I'll talk about this a little bit in my exploratory committee update, we're expected to have that second scope of work completed by March 6th. That'll give us some additional information, like I said, that I'll talk about in the exploratory committee update. Aquatic Center parking lot work to begin at the end of March or early April, so that's on pace. The city has approved permitting through all the stages that have been expected so far, so we were right on pace for that. We also have a motion for an entry of default judgment this last week that has been filed with View, and a further update will be provided to the board at the March meeting of how that goes and what View's response will be to that. With that, I'll stand for questions on the ED section of the report. Okay. Getting into the treasurer's report. Financial overview, continue to be extremely proud here. The fiscal year to date revenues of Boise Center sitting at about 2.1. We are slightly behind budget by about 20-some thousand, so it's within a 2.6% variance of that. So continue to just look at that and making sure that as the year progresses, that if that does fall further behind, we could go through and make some adjustments, but I anticipate this is just material or immaterial at this point in time on the number of food and beverage orders, types of events that we forecasted off of. So nothing alarming there on that. And then district year-to-date revenues continue to outpace the budget on that side. So again, continuing to see really great numbers come in from the tax revenues, and then also the subsidy needs towards the center, which I'll get into here. As far as the transfers and credits go, room night and total spend credits, as we've mentioned, this is just throughout the year. The annual budget is about 467,000 in those total spend credits. So that's events that come to Boise Center and they are applied a discount on their room rent based off of total spend or room nights generated. So I want to make sure that's very clear. So far, the groups have achieved about 163,000 in total discounts on the budgeted 467,000, a large portion of that being Festival Trees right off early on. Boise Center operating transfers, this is one that I want to make sure I'm comparing it to year to date from the prior month, because this is that report on the prior one that would go up and down all over the place. What this message tells me when I look at this is our prior month, we actually had money going back into the district because of the revenues of the center at this point in time. So when those transfers are in a positive variance, it's actually money that we're pulling away from the district. So this last month, we had more coming back, and year to date, what we expected would have been less than that. So again, more is coming back in, so less subsidy to the district is the overall story there. Hotel tax collections, pacing very closely to where we've got budgets, but this is out of our control. So this is more of a forecasting model that we use, but continuing to see, we had 689,000 come through in January, budgeted was 661. Year to date, we're about 62,000 over our budget. So again, that's some of the pacing ahead for the district side, along with less subsidy needs coming in. As far as the capital budgeting goes, we continue to see really great, like I said, projects getting completed that are having a really big impact to the events, to the operations, and to the team. So far, we spent about 1.6 million in capital, 2.3 million to go. Boise Center's West Refresh project being a large portion of that, and continue to see some of those bills come through. That number will continue to go up. We also are in the process of looking at an RFP or a procurement option for banquet chairs. So another large item to come there. And then it's a lot of the smaller stuff that will fall under throughout the year as we get those completed.
So banquet chairs is the biggest portion of that 2.3?
It is, yes, yep, correct. And then our cash position, as this is always something that everyone wants to know, how much cash does the district have to potentially invest in future projects? I've updated the slide to include the strategic priorities of the district, as before those were the goals. But really at this day, we have cash investments about 37.4 million. By the time you take out the 6 million of stabilization, current cash available is 31.1. By the time we get to the end of the fiscal year, looking at about 34 million in those total available cash for projects. And the last slides, we will just wait for our updates from Clearwater Advisors, because that's usually where I give you guys your updates on our investments. With that, I'll stand for any questions on the treasurer side.
Questions?
Just if I may, Madam Chair, about the district budget pacing ahead. I'm just wondering what's driving that. It's good news. I just want to know.
A lot of it's we're $62,000 ahead on tax revenue. So hotel tax revenues are a big part of that, or portion of that. The other part is the subsidy needs to the center have been less than projected.
Well done.
Any other questions? Okay, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's approved. On to exploratory, Jason Cody.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through and just briefly read a couple things here on what the exploratory committee has been up to, and a quick update from us, and then I'll let Chase speak to anything that he'd like to add to this report. As part of the exploratory committee that was formed last year, which includes myself and board member Chase Erkins, we have been meeting with many different property owners, public entities, developers, and community leaders throughout the district to help identify and evaluate potential expansion indoor partnership opportunities that the district could consider. Through those conversations, the exploratory committee has really identified a few different options that might be a priority for the district to consider at this time. One of those being an expansion on the current convention center by looking into adjacent land opportunities for potential exhibit hall space, as well as additional ballroom and meeting space that was called out in the feasibility report from Johnson Consulting. Those conversations included folks like Block 22 and Oppenheimer Development Corporation as obvious opportunities directly adjacent to the current convention center. The other option being the ability to procure additional land and space for a new facility that would be located inside or adjacent to the existing downtown core that would meet the programming elements called out in Johnson Consulting's report. The obvious challenge with option one is the adjacent land options for expansion on the current facility is extremely limited, and the ability to expand the space without acquiring additional land would be highly disruptive, if not completely prohibitive, to the current events using the convention center for years to come, and not something our committee would recommend. Option two also has some nuanced challenges in that available land in or near downtown, large enough to allow the district to grow and build what was called out for in the Johnson Consulting's report, is also limited. As part of that discovery, the exploratory committee has met with many different folks looking at those land options that would have a minimum of about 2 to 4 acres of contiguous space and as close to or in downtown as possible. But as you know, those options are also somewhat limited. Some of those conversations have included folks like Derek O'Neill with River Shore Developments, the YMCA, Roundhouse, Ada County, the YMCA, and many, many others. Given that this is where we are in narrowing our scope of recommendations, we have asked for Johnson Consulting to complete a second scope of work that is expected to be complete March 6th, as I mentioned prior in my report. That would evaluate 3 specific options. 2 of those options being exhibit hall options, with one that would consider the feasibility of 2 stacked 40,000 or 50,000 square foot exhibit hall spaces, as well as just one at a 40 to 50,000 square foot exhibit hall space with the called out additional space that would be attached. The third option would be looking into constructing a new event facility slightly outside or adjacent to the existing downtown core that achieves the recommended program elements from Johnson's first report. So kind of that second scope will be coming back on March 6th. Once we have that second report from Johnson Consulting, we will be able to have a clearer picture of what the benefits and impacts of those 3 options would have on the initial findings from Johnson's original report. In the meantime, we'll continue to evaluate and meet with stakeholders and partners to make sure we're considering all of our options. Just let Chase jump in, provide any updates as through the process on your comments.
Cody and I have been spending a lot of time together. So we've seen a lot of meetings, a lot of different groups. Still have a couple more that we're working on to see if there's any chance that certain entities would be willing to let go of some land, but not very hopeful, but we're still going to check them out and see if some of these big parking lots might work.
So any questions from the board, I'd be happy to. I know that we have an exec session that we're going to go into today. Talk about some specifics, but at this point in time, I think that the exploratory committee and that report on March 6th is going to guide us even further as we go deeper into these, but that's kind of where we're at. Now, if all of these options tend to not shake out, I think we can continue to look at some of the smaller things that were listed in that Johnson Consulting report. But my anticipation is the larger stuff that we're looking at first might be able to parlay into tackling all of the challenges that exist within the district's opportunities for products. And so I think that's our first option, would be to consider those, because they will either potentially include or parlay into those other development opportunities or partnership opportunities.
So how much square feet can go on an acre?
43,560. That means no parking.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like
So really,
realistically.
we're sitting on a 1.7 acre piece right here with Boise Center West side that we're on. And that gets a building of about 87,000 contiguous space from wall to wall. Now you got front of house, back of house needs, entrance space, all of that. That would eat up some of that square footage, but that just shows you how much. That's where that kind of 2 to 4 acre minimum is kind of a starting point for us to start looking at for consideration.
So 2 would get you maybe 80, right?
Correct. Which is why that kind of looking at the 40 or 50,000 square foot or stackable or just one, we want to know what that looks like, because there is some limited land options, and then also the adjacent options as we consider to have those conversations.
Have you seen a successful one with stackable like that attracts the
Nothing
business
that
expo?
comes as successful is the tough word there. I've seen people try to go about it, and I think that's had different levels of success. They tend to get programmed a little differently when they're stacked. The first floor that has all the exhibit space, those tend to be trade show spaces. The others get programmed much more on a little bit more like a ballroom usage, but exhibit space when it's possible, but it gets programmed more into that ballroom function.
Much like the new one in Seattle, right?
Correct.
That's the one. That's how it's configured.
They've got one of the most stacked. Well, they actually have all their exhibit hall contiguous down on the first floor, but it's one of the most stacked convention centers. So as far as just the additional space that's up above, they've added and all that, but they do have a contiguous exhibit hall all on the first floor in Seattle.
What's their square footage of their exhibit hall? Do you remember?
In Seattle,
In Seattle.
I would say 250,000,
Giant.
or maybe,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could be 300, 400, 500. I truly don't know the answer to that.
Tacoma has a 4-story one that I think is probably pretty successful. I don't know their footprint on the bottom, but it's more than an acre of what we have. And then it stacks up another, I think, 3 stories on top of the first one. So, and then the Salt Palace in Salt Lake has it. Theirs is a maze, but it has a really big exhibit center and then multiple stories up top too. I don't think we can get to that size either.
Again, Salt Lake, while it was one of the comp sets within the report, there was a lot of unique things that I think separate it. Obviously, the amount of employments, the airport travel that happens through there. They had the Olympics and a lot of other things. From a population standpoint, I think for the whole valley and where we're headed in the next 5 to 10 years, it will become closer to that population comp set, but not necessarily on some of the facilities.
Well, thank you, Chase, for putting all that.
Yeah, he's going out and doing all this exploratory committee work by going to gymnastics events all over the place and finding
Oh,
out.
there you go.
True. Can I get reimbursed for that?
Good job.
That's all for now from the exploratory committee, so thank
And
you.
so we're on track. You've heard
Yeah.
from Johnson for the March.
Correct, yeah.
Just a quick refresher on the scope of that report. I thought it was gonna be heavily financial or,
It has some components of that, but it's actually taking a look at those 3 other options and then the financials that they actually have in the first report. I want to know what impact it'll have on those because we know what year 5 and year 10 looks like of what they programmed or gave as recommendations. This is an alteration on those recommendations and I want to know what the impact of the overall financials will
Instead
be,
of
so
a-
it will include that.
Instead of 100,000 contiguous,
What is 50,000?
what's the impact if
Yeah.
we do a 50 stacked?
Knowing that, again, it's not just going to be a perfect cut in half because of the market share of what's out there from associations and for events, they take all of that into consideration as they're looking at the feasibility of a space like that.
Well, thanks for doing all the work.
I'll thank Chase for his time. Been a lot of time. he spent.
Appreciate that. And your expertise. It's great. All right, moving on. Our legislative folks, how's it going?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members, Director. Well, we're halfway through the legislative session and the House and Senate have at least set an early date of March 27th, hopefully is their go-home date. And the reason they're doing that, of course, it's an election year and they want to get back and start campaigning for their seats. So far, basically what we're seeing right now is just the tension between the executive branch and legislative branch. The governor has a budget. The legislative branch has a budget. They're far apart on how they want to go about conducting the state's business. There've only been 5 bills signed by the governor. So what I kind of driving at is everything's hinged on this budget this year because of the budget shortfall. The only one of the 5 bills was a big beautiful bill conformity, which was 155 million. They said it's up to 175 now. House leadership is saying that could go as far as 250 million before it's all done. They won't know until the filing takes place and they kind of get an idea of what it's going to cost. The Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, they've approved the 26th, the January through June budget rescissions bill had 3% governor's reduction. Then they cut another 1% out, but they left K through 12 Medicaid, corrections, state police exempt. Then they approved the Joint Finance approved the 27 maintenance budgets, that's June to June. And 5.5 billion in general fund spending. Recommend 3% government cut, the cuts the government recommended, an additional 2% for non-exempt agencies. And the discrepancy there is the governor's revenue projections are much lower than the House and Senate. It's there at 5.82 billion as a revenue projection. So that legislature saying we have $292 million left in discretionary funding. The governor's revenue projections are lower than that. So he said it's not 292 million. So the fight's going to be over that revenue number versus how much they want to bring in as they do what I always call kind of their big, beautiful bill at the end. They'll have this big, where they try to form up the revenue projections that they made on the maintenance budgets. They'll come back and say, okay, we want to add this to Medicaid, add this to health and welfare. And they're saying they have 292 million remaining in that, and that's where the governor and they disagree.
Why do they have different projections? Yes, do they use different?
The governor makes his projection, the legislature goes, well, we don't necessarily agree with that. We have this projection. Happened last year, and that's what brought on some of the discrepancy in the tax cut.
So today I heard the AG surprised that he was included in the cuts. Did he think he was in part of the exempt agencies? I mean, and is there gonna be more surprises like that?
In what, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So the AG today said he was surprised that these cuts applied to him and he has to do furloughs and all these other things that he wasn't expecting. Is that gonna happen across other agencies or?
Well, I think, I know that all the different, everybody's just saying, hey, we're all gonna have to cut. And, yeah, you may not like it, but I know the lieutenant governor complained about it too, but he's saying he's gonna take the cuts too. No, and if you're not exempt from what they mentioned, you're not exempt. I mean, you know, complain about it, but they're not gonna alter anything. A lot of growth for paying for growth issues, impact fee, a lot of discussion about how impact fee, they're gonna start seeing more and more of that, I think. The local governments are saying, hey, we've got to have some help. Legislature says we shouldn't have to pay for it. So I don't know where that's all going to go yet. There's discussion of the local option tax, which in an election year is just a non-starter. But you hear more and more. I'm surprised that you get more and more discussion about it.
And not to keep interrupting you, but last year you mentioned that there was a legislator who thought about the local option and enrolling in auditorium districts and all these other.
Yes.
Yes. But that's
Gone.
Okay.
Yes, it's gone. Affordable housing, there's some bills that want to reduce local government zoning restrictions, some of the regulatory hurdles to increase housing availability. And that's chairman of the House Business Committee, Jordan Redmond, up in that Coeur d'Alene area. So he's got 3 or 4 proposals he's floating around. I'm not sure I know where those are going to go yet. A lot of immigration enforcement. You're seeing there's a number of those bills kind of traveling around. I don't know yet how, the House and Senate aren't really passing a lot of bills yet. And until that starts, to get an idea how much that's going to move forward. Regarding the budget, the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee they approve the budget committee, and then they send it for floor for passage. Those budget proposals that they passed, they haven't even printed for the floor yet. So they're sitting on them. We just hope what we call holding them in committee. Some speculation why they haven't gone to the floor. And, there's some, do they have the votes to do it? We're going to find out pretty quick here because the 226 budget's going to the Senate. They may either vote on it tomorrow or Monday. My guess is they'll probably do it Monday. But that'll be the bellwether of how difficult these budget fights are going to be within the legislature themselves, even before they get down to the governor's office, whether he decides to keep those bills, or we don't know yet what the governor's going to do. There's some local control issues out there, some social issues. The Eagle, there's been a big rat problem out in Eagle, and you would never think that we've had 4 different drafts on that bill. It just keeps, but sounds like they're coming to some resolution on it. The Eagle rat infestation, and if does have a sense of humor to it. There was a bill, House 743, which assessed civil penalties on elected officials, and it just popped up. The Speaker of the House wrote it. We weren't quite sure what he was trying to get at with that. We can speculate, but it raised a huge fervor in that body with a number of different mayors and other elected officials that say, hey, you could be liable if, let's say you should, if there's a flag bill that says you can't fly a flag and you fly a flag anyway, you could be assessed personally on that. So that bill's been got pulled down yesterday afternoon. All 105 legislative seats are up this year. This is the week for filing, the 23rd to the 27th. everybody walking around with their computers, all the legislators, refreshing the Secretary of State's website every 3 minutes to see if anyone's running against them. All five, constitutional offices are up for election, and of course, the legislature.
That's
Any
the
surprises yet?
Right?
Any surprises yet?
Not yet.
The deadline's the 27th tomorrow.
Yeah, we're all five. Yeah, and that's what everybody's nervous about. They're like, usually by now you start saying, okay, we're gonna have this. We're on Thursday and there's a lot of unopposed. There are a lot of people unopposed right now. And that's what has it's ironic that everybody's more nervous about, they're legislators and they're more nervous about that than they're almost if they have someone that they can focus on. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, and again, Thursday and Friday is kind of the last couple of days of filings when you really start seeing, that's when people roll out their candidacy.
So, sorry,
Go ahead.
if there's not a lot of challenges, is this session gonna then, because they won't have to go out and campaign? Or
If there's not a lot of challenges, my prediction is that this next Monday, you're going to see about 500 bills roll out. Everybody's going to roll out. Well, I'm waiting to see if I have a challenge and I'm not. Oh, I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. So you'll see, I think you're going to see a lot of activity next week. And, I think, what is it, February 11th, somewhere in that time was the last day to file a bill. And since that time, I think we filed over 150 bills. So that date has become kind of a Trojan horse, if you will, because nobody adheres to it anymore because we have committees with jurisdiction to be able to override that date. Joint Finance Appropriations, Ways and Means, I think Health and Welfare. And that's what they do. They just go to those committees, State Affairs. They have them push the bill. They'll get it printed and then they send it up. The pro tem or the speaker will assign it to the committee of jurisdiction. So the other shoe hasn't dropped yet. We're mid-season. We're waiting. This kind of the time of year where something's going to have to start breaking here because literally they have 4 weeks left. They do not want to stay past the 1st of April. And if they don't get those budgets down to the governor to delineate, the governor's like, I don't care. I'm not going anywhere. And he's already told them I'll stay through May. So the pressure's on them time-wise, and frankly, surprised that they haven't moved forward on some of these budgets to move it off the floor. Right by now, you start to see the budget starting to move off the House floor, the Senate floor, but nothing yet. But this one coming up, the 26 rescissions bill, that'll be the real bellwether, kind of what we're going to look at.
Are the budgets that they're rolling out taking into consideration the big beautiful bills impact to those, or is there still a disparity? Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Are they going into?
They're factoring that in. They're all trying to factor that in. That's why I think the House came up with that extra cut. They're like, we got to compensate. Yes.
Did the governor sign the bill for the BSU
Yes, he
president
did.
search?
He signed that at Tuesday. He was in DC. He signed it Tuesday morning at 9. Yeah. House Bill 1225. And that was the bill that allowed allowed the selection committee, Boise State, to move forward without having to release 5 names. They can now withhold them and just move their selection forward. There were a number of there. Yeah, that was a good piece of legislation. Any other questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right. Anytime.
Usually I'm pretty good at things talking about, so. Happy with that. Good. Thank you. Get loaded up here right now. Good to see everybody again. Also interesting to hear the activity on these ledger. Dovetails into our stuff. So first, I'm just going to cover a couple of market events, things that have been really driving markets for the last 3 months, talk about how that's impacted the portfolio, and then talk a little bit about the portfolio. So really, since I last presented in November, there's been a couple of things that have really driven markets. One is changes at the Federal Reserve. Obviously, it's no surprise President Trump's been pretty active in verbally trying to get them to cut rates, but he kind of ramped up this year those activities to
be a little bit more direct. Tried to fire a Fed governor, launched a criminal investigation into testimony that the chair has given. That chair is gone in May, and he nominated nominated his successor. So that's going to be making its way through the Senate. There's a couple of interesting points on that I'm going to go over. Outside of that, it's been things that would usually give markets indigestion, and that's global tensions. We've seen it in Venezuela, Greenland, more of Greenland, and then in the Middle East, and as well as kind of the lingering concerns around AI and the impacts. And really that has to do with the labor market. And so, you know, for a portfolio like this, where you don't have many risk sectors and you just have treasuries, agencies, and then a little bit of municipal, these things on balance are positive for the portfolio. If you usually get risk on or risk off moments, yields fall, which we've seen, and you'll see that in a second, then that causes the market value of your investments to gain. So those have been positive. The only kind of offsetting effect of that is the tariff discussions. So we saw in April of last year a lot of volatility introduced because of the tariffs that at the levels that they were set. Those have obviously been brought down in effective terms just because of deals that they've made, and then, you know, the market avoiding some of those tariffs. But the Supreme Court just ruled that a large portion of those tariffs are invalidated. No surprise, that introduces more uncertainty and volatility just because it's a key component of the administration's economic plan. And so they're not going to let it go easy. He announced new tariffs that are in effect. Under that authority, it would only be in place for 150 days unless Congress extended that. So he's probably looking for other avenues, because I doubt Congress has enough votes to implement a 15% tax, especially, you know, without an expedited maneuver that can get around Democrats' block. So this is the yield curve, the change since the last meeting or the last time I presented here. And so you see it's about 10 basis points that it's declined. There's been a lot of volatility in between those periods related to economic data and some of those events we talked about. But overall, this is a positive for the portfolio. So this means that the market value of most of your securities increased. So now moving on to the Fed, really the thing here is the president obviously wants pretty aggressive cuts to interest rates. Given where economic data is, that doesn't make sense. The Federal Reserve has not said it's going to cut that aggressively. However, he did get one person on the committee that has put their dot, is the dot there that's circled in red. I think that's helpful for understanding what does the administration want the Fed funds rate to be. From where it is today, based on that dot, they want about 5 or 6 25 basis point cuts. That's pretty aggressive, especially as I said, where we stand economically. And I have some economic metrics here that you'll kind of see why that doesn't make sense. So the question then is, does the market think that the president's going to get what he wants? And the answer is no. So this is at each meeting that the Fed's going to have through December of 2027. How are markets pricing in the change in the Fed funds rate? Where do they expect it from today's level? So really, through the end of 27, they only think there's going to be 3 cuts overall. That's the only slightly more cuts than they had previously believed just before Kevin Warsh, which is the nominee to succeed Powell, the day before he was nominated. So the market really didn't react to it. And that larger reaction in the December of 27 dot, that could have been impacted by some labor-related and AI concerns. And so really the ability for Kevin Warsh to affect change in the Federal Reserve is pretty limited. And the reason for that is it was set up this way. You've heard a lot of other agencies where the administration got Supreme Court rulings where they did get to instill people that they wanted and fire people that they didn't want because of some policy differences. In the Federal Reserve, it's viewed differently. So all the members that are Fed governors, that's the middle column, appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, 14-year terms, really long terms. The bank presidents make up the balance of the interest rate setting committee, and they're on 1-year rotating terms on the committee, but they have 5 terms overall. They're not appointed by the president, they're appointed by their board of directors. And then the only way that the president can affect that is by appointing governors who can veto the reappointment of those presidents. Well, that also didn't work because all of the Federal Reserve Bank presidents were just renominated to 5-year terms. So if he had any issues with any of them, it didn't really work. The only other thing here is Warsh. So his views have changed. He has historically been a pretty conservative member. He was a Fed governor in the Bush years during the crisis. He was only one vote, as all these people are, and he had classically more conservative views than most of the other members of the board at that time. His views have changed somewhat. And then what the market is saying in its pricing, where it really didn't make any difference for what he's saying, and I'm going to go over a couple of the things that he said, is that he is only one vote, and the market's thinking he's only saying what he needs to say to get through the Senate confirmation process, and then he's probably going to govern more evenly once he gets in place. And he's a known entity to the market, so that makes them more comfortable. They'd rather have him than someone who looks way more political, which Kevin Hassett, who's already in the White House and the administration, he was the other one being considered. And that would have come with way more market impact. So then the question is, what's Warsh's views? Really just two things to focus on here, because the other stuff is very in the weeds and kind of wonky and Federal Reserve stuff. One, he wants lower interest rates. He used to prefer higher, and that's not always true, just less restrictive versus more restrictive. So now he's kind of carrying the water of the administration and saying we can bring rates down more than we thought. He's leaning a lot on AI stuff for that, the assumptions around AI returns and the productivity gains. But then also he's kind of offsetting it with a smaller balance sheet. He's always wanted that. The Fed has grown its balance sheet considerably since the financial crisis. Now he's saying if you shrink the balance sheet, the restrictive nature of that is offsetting the dovish nature of lower interest rates, and so they're counterbalanced. Those are still going to be really hard to get through because most of the Fed members that have terms through the 2030s, they're still on the committee and they have pretty hawkish views, and it's going to be hard to move them from where they currently are, and they're looking at economic data. And so it'll take some time. On the balance sheet, that's also a little constrained. You'd have to change how you carry out monetary policy, because if you lower the balance sheet too much, that can lead to liquidity issues and overnight rates spiking. And so the Federal Reserve has kind of shrunk its balance sheet in the last year or two, but it stopped doing so just recently because of some of those liquidity issues, and it let it rise a little bit. So again, another thing that I don't think there's much pushback on it internally. It's more about the mechanics of that. And then finally, I think this doesn't have any impact on this portfolio, but kind of an interesting note is the crisis intervention. Kevin Warsh wants a smaller Fed. He doesn't want them having too much impact in the markets and credit allocation. So a lot of the support you heard about during the financial crisis and during COVID, those are things he's not very supportive of, and he would probably want to limit its nature, not completely eliminate, but scale back the extent that they're willing to intervene in a crisis. So then there's questions of where's the economy? This one I kind of just set it up so that the more green dots, the better. No surprise. Red light, green light. Some of these pieces of data, they're kind of lagging, so they don't really tell us too much. GDP, we saw it was softer in the fourth quarter. Well, we're already in the first, well into the first quarter. So, okay, cool. We hope it doesn't continue on. So we usually look for things that are indicators. We started to get jobs data for the first month. They were better. The jobs data was better than expected, and that's why it's green. But that doesn't mean much. If that could easily start to pull back. 1 month of data doesn't really tell me much of anything, and so I'm cautious about that green.
And it'll be revised.
And it will be revised down, as we see consistently. But for the Federal Reserve, the real thing in terms of its rate outlook and keeping rates higher for longer and pushing back against the administration's view of cutting rates sooner is the inflation data. And so if you look at headline CPI, which is the one that most people see in the headlines, it's green dot because it's coming down. And that's been surprising, especially with tariffs, especially with some of these other sectors that people have expected it to be a little bit hotter. Housing has come down a lot more than we expected. Energy's been volatile. But the Fed doesn't really pay as much attention to the headline CPI. They look at PCE. And that has been trending higher. It's stickier towards 3%. That's the next That's the very last two. And I put those as yellow just because of the way they've been trending the last few months. And the primary difference between those is how they weight categories. So housing is a much higher component of CPI, whereas in PCE, the Fed's looking at, it's not as much. And medical services are a larger component of PCE. So those are just some of the main differences that can cause a mixed outlook in inflation. But most of the Fed governors very cautious on inflation. They're not ready to say it's a win yet. They still want to see it get down to that 2% before they move rates. So they could stay where they are for quite a while. I just add AI in here because in the long term, it could be a disinflationary force. But also there's the risk that you have a lot of displacement in the labor market in the immediate term, still to be determined. And if you saw a lot of that immediate displacement more than we would be expecting, that would be something that would lead the Fed to cut rates faster by a larger margin that they're currently looking at. And that would also be positive for a predominantly treasury portfolio, duration related portfolio. This just shows that within the last several quarters, AI related components of GDP have been a growing piece. And so it's really AI pieces and then consumers. When you have too few categories contributing most of your GDP, it just adds some instability and concern there. There's also questions around that circular investment of AI. I don't think it's very clear yet. One thing in credit markets that we look at is issuance for corporates. Most of the AI investment so far has not been related to debt issuance. They haven't had to do that. But that is something that you will see over time that's going to have to be debt funded. And usually that adds increased risk to credit markets. So it's something we'd be cognizant of. And then this just shows the tariff changes. So you see a pretty significant decline in that effective tariff rate after the Supreme Court had its ruling and then instituted the 15% temporarily. So that puts the effective rate back up above 10%. He's not going to let this go very easily. And so we're going to see more volatility in it. This is the one that can cause over time rates to move higher, but probably not as much as the labor component. So just something to be cognizant of. Any questions there before I talk about the portfolio very quickly? Cool. So for the portfolio, not a lot's changed. I think the main thing, there's two things to really be focused on here is one, the portfolio is doing exactly as it's intended to do. You're still earning about a 4% book yield at today's levels. As we reinvest and yields are falling, that's going to kind of trickle down. But hopefully, since we have a longer portfolio, that happens at a slower pace. You're on track around 1.3 million in income annually at this level. And then also we have really good flexibility as we're talking about things on the exploratory committee and possible purchase of land. We have a lot of flexibility in the portfolio because 70+% of the positions are in a gain position. And if yields keep moving down, they're only going to continue to work into that. Overall, it's 173 unrealized gains. So there's a lot of flexibility in the portfolio, not a lot of changes. We did make a couple of purchases. There's not a lot, there wasn't really much issuance in the Idaho muni space that we could participate in the taxable space. And then agencies are still kind of not really offering much over treasuries. So really this is about chasing duration and not deviating too far from a benchmark while still being focused on that time frame for, the not reinvestment, but for meeting funding for projects. So we just extended a little bit, got it back up to benchmark duration. This is some of the intra-period variability that you can see that causes some of the performance deviations, but still earning 4.72% on a rolling 12-month basis. So, any questions?
We're making roughly 108,000 a month. 1.3.
Yeah, roughly that. Yeah. I think since the last meeting, it was 350,000 in income. So yeah, right around there.
Seems higher than what we were showing on the slides, like 86,000.
85?
85 and 86 per month on the interest income on that. So I'll look into
It's
them.
just different.
It's a good problem to have.
You said
I think it might also
4.72.
depend on the, if you look at like income, I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
But if you look at income detail versus like interest income, so there might be like other sources of income that aren't coupon related. But I can take a look at that.
We'll get that corrected if there's a difference.
4.72 on a 12-month rolling. How's that compared to the benchmark?
Yeah, the benchmark was 4.77% on that same basis. And so this is contributing to that, which we're usually trying to chase the benchmark in duration, but they're still very similar.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Great. Next item on the agenda is executive session.
Madam Chair, pursuant to Idaho Code, section 74206(1)C, acquire an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency and do so by a roll call vote.
Roll call?
Ms. Mucko,
Yes.
Mrs. Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Erkins,
Yes.
Mr. Rastegar.
Yes.
So we still on.
What's that?
Sophie, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
All right. So back in open session. 4:40. What time is it? 4:40? Wow. All righty. Okay, so seeing no other business before the board, meeting is adjourned. Okay.